be a heavenly throne, not an earthly one. See, everybody anticipated it would be earthly. But if you read the Old Testament carefully, you'd know it would be a heavenly throne, not earthly. See, which is really throwing everybody off. The number of details. See, at a bare minimum, we're looking at 200 specific prophecies, 200 specific details. There's no prophecies of, say, Isis or Osiris, or any of that. Okay, I mean, there's the mythology of the Egyptians.
Yeah, I know the stories. There's not prophecies before the stories, but the stories are almost exact of the life of Jesus.
Yeah, or there's Dionysius, for example, others. So there are some parallels, but the parallels are actually very, very small compared to the total picture. So, okay, which one of those died for the sins of all mankind?
I don't know if any of them were described as so, but
No.
there were, I think it was Enos, that was described as dying for the sins of man. And so it's more that there aren't, the Bible is very widely distributed, widely known, everything like that, and these are very hard to find facts on. Like I've had to,
really dig.
Yeah, really, really dig for these. But
so, say let's take Enos' case. Was there a resurrection?
3 days and a resurrection.
Now, how did the sacrificial system?
I'm not quite sure how it went about. I know that they said something about a friend. He had kind of disciples, I guess you would call them, that he was preached with, and one of them betrayed him to the local authorities, and he was sacrificed for their sin.
Okay. Now, what preparation was there in motion for that sacrifice?
I have no idea.
Okay. So there wasn't any. Is the point?
Yeah.
See, this, when we're looking at this one, you have a very, very carefully laid out sacrificial system. See, that's in motion so that when the sacrifice of Christ takes place, see, it fits in exactly the right spot of something that's been set in motion for thousands of years. See, in contrast to these, see, they're kind of almost like a pop-up thunderstorm. Boom, here they are, happened, gone. Some legends developed connected with it. Okay. Whereas in this one, see, a very, very careful record, very, very careful plan, and also a plan not just to sacrifice. See, in other words, part of my presentation, and I'm not sure how clearly it came through, but see, forgiveness of sins is just a small part. See, for Christians, forgiveness of sins just clears away the past, so that now this whole concept of the new creation can be set in motion, so that now there's a spiritual warrior here that is capable of overcoming sin in his life, but also then capable of carrying a spiritual revolution into the teeth of the New World Order, for example. See, none of these other systems have any provision or any plan for that whatsoever, see. And it's pretty clear from the Bible, see, forgiveness of sins is not the central message. See, the actual indwelling Spirit is the central message of what was laid out. See, for example, one that we talked about earlier is in Abraham's day, where God told Abraham, in your seed, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. On the surface, that looks like a prophecy of Jesus being the physical descendant of Abraham. But see, Jesus in the flesh never came to the Gentiles. His own words were, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. See, it's only Jesus in the Spirit. See, it's going to the Gentiles. See, and this is what one of the things that the New Testament calls a mystery, the pieces of which were in the Old Testament all the way along here, and nobody recognized it. But they're there. And so, see, the message then is a lot more than forgiveness of sins. It's actually how to cause there to be new creations indwelt and empowered by the Holy Spirit. See, that's a lot more powerful and bigger message than just simply somebody dying for sins. See, the parallel starts to really break down in contrast to that, much larger scope. Now you can see if there is a God, And if in fact he is prosecuting warfare against, say, a dark angel, then at some point he has to produce spiritual warriors, truly new spiritual beings, in order to execute that warfare. And so what you've got here is something that's really logical, carefully prepared for, documented, as having been in existence for thousands of years, in order for it to come to fruition. I mean, it's pretty amazing, actually, when you look at it. And so when you start comparing the other legends, they really fall short. I mean, they're only, say there's a little pop-up thunderstorm compared to this, say, massive storm.
Yeah. It was just the uncanny, correlations. How often do you hear about somebody dying for exactly 3 days and coming back? It's...
Well, if you were Satan, what would you try to do?
True.
Yeah. Because he definitely understood the prophecy. Because he tried to intercept.
Yeah. See, so if he's trying to short circuit things ahead of time, what would he do? See, in what would be pure paganism?
Yeah, it would be inventing the same
as much as he could, but without the capacity to really truly execute anything that long term. Okay. So to me, it's pretty awesome, because what that tells me now is, okay, now I have the hope of being able to have additional power here. Not that I can run faster than a speeding bullet or leap over a tall skyscraper or anything like that, but I have some spiritual power here, to enable me to go up against, whatever I need to encounter in the way of spiritual warfare. If I need to meet with President Obama, I would clearly regard him as an inferior. And I'd be nice about it. I'd be civil, I'd be polite, but I know he's not on the same level as me. Because I know what the Bible teaches, so I know who's who. And again, it's not anything to do with my greatness. One of my favorite stories is Ben-Hur, Judah Ben-Hur. Judah Ben-Hur was a Sadducee Jew. Of course, it's a fiction story, but it's a great point to it. He grew up in Judea, Jerusalem, and he had a childhood friend that was a Roman named Messala. So boys got to be teenagers. Messala was sent back to Rome for education, and Judah Ben-Hur grew up, took over the family business and so forth. Well, eventually Messala comes back to Jerusalem. And of course he wants his old friend Judah Ben-Hur to come see him. So Judah Ben-Hur comes down, and Messala says, after a few introductory greetings, and Messala says, I need your help. He said, I'm going to be the assistant governor of Judea, and I need your help in controlling the Jewish people. And Ben-Hur says, you need my help controlling my people? And that's not happening. So Messala's pretty upset at that. So Judah Ben-Hur goes back to his house. Well, about this time, the new governor gets introduced, and he and his sister up on a rooftop, and she accidentally bumps a tile on the roof wall, and it falls over and just about kills the new commander, and his horse is upset. So they arrest Judah Ben-Hur's family, and his mother and sister go to prison, and they put Ben-Hur in as a slave in the galleys, rowing the ships. So he's in the galleys for a number of years, and I read the book too, so he switches from the right to the left, to make sure that he's keeping his muscles balanced. Well, at some point they're in this tremendous war, and he looks through the porthole and he sees this enemy trireme coming right at him. And so the guy that's pounding the beat out, he actually comes down and he unlocks Ben-Hur's chains. And when the enemy ship strikes, of course, their boat falls apart. Ben-Hur's a pretty strong swimmer, and he finds a chunk of boat to float on, and then he reaches down and he rescues somebody that's drowning. Well, the guy that he rescues is the Roman tribune, that's the commander of the entire Roman flotilla. And so in appreciation, this guy takes Ben-Hur with him back to Rome and adopts him as his son. You know, his own actual son had died, and so he adopted Ben-Hur. And so now this is the Roman tribune, Quintus Flavius Arius. He's got the full title because the adopted son has full rights. And so after a while, he asked his father, he says, "Can I go back to Judea and take care of my affairs?" And he said, "Yeah, I hate to see you go, but I know you need to, so go ahead." So when he gets back to Jerusalem, sets a few things in order, goes to go see his old friend Messala, you know, who sentenced him to those years of rolling in the galleys. But he has himself introduced as Quintus Flavius Arius Tribune, okay, who way outranks Messala. So when Charlton Heston played it in the movie, he did a great job. And so here's Messala now standing at attention because the Tribune opens the door. Here's Judah Ben-Hur. Messala says, "Judah Ben-Hur? I thought it was Quintus Flavius Arius." And so he goes over and he takes a camel and pours some wax out, and he takes that ring, stamps the ring. It's got the seal of Quintus Flavius Arius Tribune. So his adopted son, full rights. Now, when we get immersed into Christ, we receive the spirit of adoption. See, we got a new name, new position, new title. It's called child of God. And it outranks everybody on this planet. See, beloved, see how great a love the Father has bestowed upon us, that we should be called the children of God. And such we are. For this reason, the world does not know us, because it did not know him. We're humble sort of kings because we're so confident in who we are that we can do any job without it impacting us. If you ever had a good boss, you know that good boss, you know, he'll get right down in the trenches with you. And you get some new foreman on the crew and he's a little bit unsure and you're not getting down in the trenches because he's got to prove he's the boss. But the guy who knows he's the boss, no problem. He's down in the trenches right with you. If he needs to be, you know. Sometimes he's too busy, says the guy, "I got to leave," but you know. So you know that. You know he would be, and that's the kind of people we are. See, we're willing to get down in the trenches with people where they really are, and we can rub shoulders with them and interact with them, because it's not going to impact who we are. It doesn't change us. So that's what it means to be an adopted child of God. And that's the reason, one of the reasons that God promised the Holy Spirit way back in the Old Testament here, is to produce a people that can get in and work with the masses humanity, care for them, and help to lift them out of the slime that they find themselves in. Nice to be able to get down the slime and not get slimy. See, and that's where God's going with this thing. See, and he prophesied that, lays it out. So forgiveness of sin is a very small part of a much bigger picture that God has. Now, one of the things, you know, some years ago, some of the guys in the Netherlands or Denmark or someplace, they produced a movie. I think the title of it was The Garden Plot. Basically, the thrust of the garden plot was that when Jesus accidentally got himself crucified, and the apostles got together in the Garden of Gethsemane and concocted the story of Jesus' resurrection. So it's called the garden plot in order to keep it going. Say, well, that's a fair objection. Say, it has to be considered. But what's interesting about that, say I spent some time making up a lie, you know, and I worked through the details, you know, resurrection and so forth. Get to Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, when Peter, of course, you know, he's using Old Testament scriptures to prove to the Jews that Jesus was to be raised from the dead, among other things. Kind of interesting all by itself. But anyhow, when he's asked what to do, his first part of his sentence was, repent, let each of you be immersed in the name of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins. You receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. Second part, verse 39. I love Acts 2:38 and 39. Very good. Guy's all right. For the promises for you and your children, see, which is a Jewish expression for the Hebrew people, and then for all who are far off, as many as the Lord our God shall call to himself. Peter, in Acts 2, says that the Holy Spirit's going to be for the Gentiles. He doesn't have a clue what he just said. You don't have a clue what he just said. Now see, if you're making the thing up, you know what it is that you made up. You didn't have a clue what he said. And so the indwelling Holy Spirit to the Gentiles, which nobody anticipated, see, is what really, in a simple sense, pulls this whole thing together, is the fact that God authored this and put it in motion. Actually, in Acts chapter 3, he said the same thing. He said, you are the sons of the covenant which God made with your fathers, saying to Abraham, in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. He said, for you first. God raised up his servant and sent him to bless you by turning every one of you from your wicked ways. You first. Who's going to be second? Yeah. Didn't understand what he said. Totally missed it. Okay. 13 years later, somewhere around that category, God has to basically grab him by the scruff of the neck and run him up to the Gentiles. You're gone, boy. And when he gets there, he said, it's not lawful for a man who is a Jew to associate with foreigners or visit them. He's got his apology right there. And yet, 10 years earlier, 13 years earlier, somewhere in that category, he already said the Holy Spirit's for the Gentiles. Totally. See, so you got all these things here that pretty clearly establish that only God could have been the author of it. And to me, it's exciting because I get the opportunity then. I mean, you have no idea how much I'm enjoying your questions. See,
I'm sorry, I'm taking the thing.
no, I mean this is cool stuff, isn't it?
No,
I mean this is.
I'm glad she asked the questions because there's a lot of stuff we talked about that I wouldn't have thought to investigate. I think it's awesome. But you are certainly welcome here anytime. I'm glad you're brave enough to ask questions. A lot of people go, I'm talking about this in front of them. I think it's great.
Some guy sitting there eating banana. No way am I talking. Yeah, he could throw that peel right at him.
I just always fear that I'm going to insult people by questioning their whole belief and social structure and everything like that. When I question it, it's like everything about you is not true to me. So and I totally don't mean it that way. So it's interesting to actually hear people who would talk to me and not feel offended by me not believing what they believe.
See, well, truth has no fear of questions. That's true. See, the only thing that's afraid of questions is lies. Or somebody's trying to hide something.
And truth is treason in the empire of lies, isn't that right?
She sounds like she's run into some people that we run into before we became Christians. We just felt like everybody was telling us a different story. We'd meet another group of religious people and they would tell us something else. It was and they all claimed to be Christians.
Well, it didn't help. I was raised in a covenant, non-denominational church, and then I went to a Lutheran school and then a Catholic boarding school. So it was
oh my God.
I got
I can't
every
believe you're not in therapy. That's awesome.
Yeah. But see, it generated those questions because to me that's really, super exciting because those are questions that absolutely everybody needs to ask and to answer. Every single person needs to do that in order to know. You got to have your own faith. There's nobody that can have it for you. And so you got to ask those questions.
They're reasonable.
Yeah, I'm so excited you're asking. It's great. So I don't see it. I hope that helps because, I mean, there's just no holes.
Yeah.
And if you find one, boy, get a hold of me pronto because,
Well, like I said, I don't claim to find holes in anything. It's just there's a lot of options out there, and a lot of them seem valid.
yeah.
And like I don't claim to believe in the Big Bang Theory, but it has its merits, and just as creation has its merits, it's understandable that it's hard to conceive just conception and all that coming from nowhere, and so some sort of, I don't know, I would call it just a conscience, not so much a intelligent being or whatever, but just a conscience is part of that. It seems reasonable to accept that, but at the same time it's not factual to me, so it takes a while.
Yeah. See, when you get back, I mean, you start probing into those things, okay, take the Big Bang Theory, okay, where did the Big Bang begin with?
Yeah, that's one of the other
Yeah, so, okay,
mysteries of it.
yeah, so, okay, well, some of the theories are that it was an element smaller, it was all the mass of the universe was compacted into something smaller than an electron. I'm thinking, and you guys haven't come to
Believe it.
believe in the
Believe it.
I mean,
Talk about faith.
yeah, so,
Yeah, like all even scientific belief is belief,
Yeah.
and so it's just finding the factual matter in it. But
Yeah.
like I guess the reason that I find validity in that, like, not saying it's truth, I'm just saying it has its points because with the Bible, one of the major difficulties I have is the fact that it only references Earth. And I think it's intellectually dishonest to, just based on sheer probability, to say that Earth is the only life-sustaining planet in the universe. Because it's so immense, so vast. There's no possible way, like, there's a possibility that there could be, just bacterial life on one of the moons of Jupiter. And so the restrictiveness of the Bible, it just seems like there's so much out there, and it just focuses on this one little planet. And this is supposed to be all of existence is, based in this one little planet. It's hard for me to accept something so small for something so big.
mhm. Yeah. See, maybe there's a reason for that too.
True.
But I won't fry your brain with any more of that.
Yeah, I'm pretty tired anyways.
But again, that brings up a whole other set of interesting questions. See? But I say we won't go there.
Yeah. So everybody else has theirs, so.
Yeah. So that's a great question.
Has there been life on, like, the planets that we have been able to explore? Have they found?
Oh. No, I mean,
No. What I was talking about is Io. It's one of the moons of Jupiter. It's covered in ice, and just the patterns in the ice. They think that because of the volcanoes on, Europa is the one covered in ice. Because of the volcanoes on Io, there could be at some point in history a time where they got close enough to where the ice would melt or something like that, and there may be bacterial life within the ice, either fossilized or contained or something like that. It's just they have to actually go and investigate it. Nothing's gotten that far.
yeah, really good. Yeah. So far. And see, it's based a little bit on the assumption that these things can evolve by random mechanical processes, which, see, again, that's why that brings up a whole other question that I really didn't want to go into with you tonight, but I got to figure out how to get back and see this. What's next on your list?
That's, pretty much everything almost. I'm curious to know if you've ever heard of the term Geo-Engineering. Yeah, what do you think about it?
Let me make sure I'm communicating now. By Geo-Engineering, are you thinking of like geocentric, or are you thinking of, tell me what you mean by that. Yeah.
Geo-engineering in the sense of HAARP, trying to manipulate the weather.
Oh, okay.
And I guess it could extend. It could possibly extend to genetically modified foods and I guess conspiracy maybe called chemtrails.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I don't know. You see, when you try to look, I mean, obviously genetically modified foods, you know, that's definitely something, you know, I mean, we know Monsanto. And,
Right, yeah.
definitely dealing with that. You know, when it comes to being able to actually modify the weather, you know, we're talking a different order of being able to do that. You take the Pacific Ocean; it's so massive. You know, it's hard to even get a comprehension. And see, right now, I mean, our weather right here is because of the massive winds that are coming off the Pacific this year, that are pushing everything else way to the north. Well, when you look at how big the Pacific is, see, how do you, what humanly could you have that would actually impact something on that scale?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas genetically engineering wheat, for example, or corn, something that's doable. So, you know, I think there's different things. I have no doubt, but what, you know, say the Russians, for example, tried to play with the weather. We know about cloud seeding and, you know, things like that. So these small scale things, but it doesn't seem like, you know, anything large scale. Now, when it comes to what impact some of these things have on us humans, it seems like anytime man starts messing with things, sooner or later he messes it up. And so,
Well, because nature still plays a role.
yeah. And so when, you know, if we start genetically modifying things, you know, who knows what we mess up in the process of genetic modification here. And, you know, I'll give you an example. You know, the government does this all the time. In our area, we have a lot of really nice fishing streams and, you know, lakes and stuff like that. You know, some of them been, you know, seeded. That is, they brought fish in. You know, some of the old timers brought some of the local trout into the lakes and stuff. But every once in a while, the federal, you know, fisheries, you know, come up with some idea, and they're going to clear a certain population of fish out of a certain lake by introducing another population. Oh, and then they figure, you know, we really compound the problem because introducing this other type of fish created a lot of problems we didn't anticipate, and you know, we got, you know, now we've really compounded things. Just you know, sooner or later, it seems like every time man tries to, you know, do those things, particularly the government, you know, they mess it up. And we know that private enterprise would be much more responsible, and if they were doing something on something they own, they would take good care of it and think things through much more carefully.
Mm-hmm.
So, what impact some of the geoengineering and how much of that again is deliberate, you know, is designed to say impact the food supply, or the introducing carcinogens, you know, into, or you know, what role did the Center for Disease Control in the development of AIDS? I mean, you got all kinds of these things here that, again, very difficult to get answers to, but certainly there are things going on there that, you know, again, you can always say, well, come on, Jesus, you know, come on back here. If things get too far out of whack, then just you know, stop. You know, stop the tape.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the term voluntarism?
Are you talking about the government's program of trying to get like AmeriCorps?
No.
Okay, are you talking about volunteers for private enterprise and you know, volunteering for without organization for political action, or?
Voluntarism is just
In the sense of human interaction.
yeah, it's a voluntary exchange between human beings as opposed to coercion.
Yeah. I mean, of course, that's how all real human interaction is.
Right. And the basic premise is anything that's voluntary or
Yeah.
consensual should be permissible or is moral, and anything that's you know, backed by force or coercion would be considered immoral.
Yeah.
So I guess my last question would be, I know that you're a Ron Paul supporter.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you agree with him on every single issue or not, but you know, he obviously teaches and preaches the principles of individual liberty, voluntarism, non-aggression, and you know, sound money and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Could you share with us where we could find those type of principles in the Bible, assuming that they are?
Well, okay, let's put it in this terms. What's the biblically defined role for government?
Great question.
Hold the sword.
Yeah. See, in Romans chapter 13, when it talks about, one of the things it talks about is it's a minister of justice. Okay? And this is, for this, it does not bear the sword for nothing. Okay? And you might want to look at Romans chapter 13.
I have it pulled up.
Okay, verses 1 through 7, for example. So how do you define justice? See, is the question. And justice is defined in the Old Testament. See, is a very simple principle: eye for eye, tooth for tooth, limb for limb, life for life. So the government then does have a role in the administration of justice. In fact, it's the only protection of life, liberty, and property, within certain limits, and the administration of justice. Basically, the government can't do anything you can't do yourself.
Right.
That's what it boils down to. So, when it comes to moral issues, the way the country was set up was and I believe this has always been Ron Paul's position, for example, these issues will be determined on a local basis.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you're liable to have a different set of say, standards in New Orleans than you might have in, say, Richmond, Virginia, for example, and those things would be determined locally. So, say, take the issue of homosexuality, for example, that would be, say, between consenting adults, as an example. Would government have any role in, say, legislation and or punishment with regard to that issue? See, would be the question. And now, what this all does is it actually gets back to the people. Because, you see, if you have a people that drift away from the moral principles, and this shows up in the book of Judges, to where, say, homosexuality becomes pretty much an accepted norm, then, that society, that group at that point will accept homosexuality and, won't deal with it. They'll let it go. See, if a society has a little bit more of a biblical stance on that, then they'll take steps to block that as being criminal activity. And so Ron Paul's idea is to put those things to be local. As soon as they're federally determined, or even to some degree the state determined, then there always becomes an agenda attached to those things, and that agenda is always destructive to the freedom of the people.
Well, of course, anytime you give people the power to permit something, they can always take it away. And same with the opposite. Like the Roe v. Wade decision, it determined the government gets to decide what the rule on that is. They could switch to either way all they want, but like now government's in marriage, so government gets to decide your marriage. It can flip either way, but it is in control of that, and so it's just every legislation is taking control. It's not giving you something or taking something away. It's controlling the issue.
Okay, when those things were historically at a local level, then people knew who was married and who wasn't anyway. And see, when it becomes a matter of licensure, as you know, then you have certain other issues that begin to develop in connection with that. And like you want your guns licensed. See, well, do you really want your marriage license? See? So, I mean, those are parallel thought processes that you have to go through. Now, what is it that defines a marriage? I mean, what is the source of the definition of marriage? See, that would be the other question. See, if you accept the Bible as authority, then what you'll notice that there's always some sort of ceremony connected with that. You know, Isaac, for example, took Rebecca into his tent. See, in a nomad society, that's some of you guys know John Dowdy. John and his friend, one year they went to climb Mount Ararat, look for the Noah's Ark, and they got in the midst of a bunch of Kurdish people. They were herding their sheep up there at about 12,000 feet elevation. And John, those guys had helped him because they brought a bunch of extra batteries, and these guys needed batteries to run their infrared equipment and their night vision things to protect themselves from the Kurdish or from the Turkish government. You know? So they let John and his friends stay with him. He told them, he said, look, there's one rule here, very important. No man is allowed inside another man's tent unless the man is also present. Well, you can understand why that would be a very good rule. See, well, John, he's an American guy, so he forgot. See, so all of a sudden he's in the guy's tent talking to the guy's wife.
Oh, no.
See, all of a sudden there's a tap on the shoulder.
Oh, gosh.
This time, I forgive. You're American, I forgive. This time, I forgive. The next time. Said, you know, so when Abraham takes Sarah, Rebecca into the tent, see, that's a very specific ceremony done in the presence of everybody living in that tent village. And that was known then that she was his wife. See, it was simple, but it was known. See, the same way, you know, in the New Testament times we have the marriage feast, you know, and so they're waiting for the bridegroom to come, and when he comes, they all go to the wedding feast. So, see, every culture, because marriage is not Christian, marriage is human, across all cultural bounds. And so every culture could set up its boundaries as to what defines the marriage ceremony. But there is to be one. Actually, it's kind of interesting. You can tell it's for the security of the women. You know, and when you get a society that's coming apart like ours, there's no security for the women because where are the guys? You know, by the time it gets tough, and you know, and she needs help. Guess where he is? He's gone because 95% of moms in inner cities in this country are single moms. Imagine how tough that is. See, because people forgot, about the fact, the marriage. See, but any society that breaks down is going to get the type of government it deserves. And so, when you get a society like ours, when people are step by step being reduced to the level of animal, intellectually and morally, animals have to have a herdsman. And you see that in the book of Judges. See, they got this decline here that's recorded, and it closes with the idea that there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. And we had a society that just came apart. It had to have a king. See? And any society that goes that same route is going to have a king because they don't have the self-governing ability left to govern themselves.
Quick question. Is a marriage that isn't recognized by the state, is it still recognized by the Christian church if it's done within?
Well, I've actually performed a lot of marriages where there was no, paperwork. Now, generally, I'll give you an example. I performed a wedding for a couple, and what they did was they signed the back of the Bible. Well, and trouble developed, and she took off for Canada. She was a Canadian citizen. And she was gone for 2 years. She first tried to deny that she was ever married, and then the little girl was born. The problem is the little girl looked exactly like her dad. But he kept sending her flowers once a week. sent her card, flowers. Finally, after about 2 years, she said she'd like to come back. Okay, now, you got to get a Canadian citizen back into the U.S. because she's married. So we don't have any official state papers. Okay. So both the Canadian government and the American government accepted that's in the back of the Bible, and the fact that there are 120 witnesses. So you don't need it. Now, of course, it's getting all weirded out anyway. In the state of Montana, let's say a guy meets a gal at some bar. They decide to go to the motel for the night, and they register as Mr. and Mrs. They're married. And to dissolve that union, they have to go through divorce proceedings.
Wow.
It's no fault divorce, no fault marriage, apparently. Okay, but and once again, you got the state. You got everything playing either side for control. And that's what the issue is the control. So, it'd be very simple if we just got back to the very simple societies, allowed things to be determined at a local level, and let it go with that. In Las Vegas is still legalized prostitution, and Butte, Montana would legalize prostitution, and Harrisonburg, Virginia probably wouldn't. And that'd be okay. Just be local. But once you get outside of that, then, see, one of the worst cases that came before the Supreme Court was about 1958. I can't remember the name of the case, but it was an issue of trying to determine whether something was obscene or not. Okay. The problem wasn't that the Supreme Court ruled it was obscene. The problem was that the Supreme Court ruled it all on the issue, which is what you were saying earlier. And so, step by step, the federal government is taking the position of regulating all aspects of our lives, and that's the big problem.
Is that the I'll know when I see it?
Yeah.
That's right. The court in Virginia and in Texas is currently voting on, is currently trying to rule on redistricting. They have no jurisdiction. They've just created legal jurisdiction in their mind. And if it stands, they change law without going through any process.
Yeah. All of a sudden now the federal government's determining the redistricting in the state.
Absolutely, they have no right.
Regardless of how crooked the state may be, the state's a lot easier to deal with than the federal government. So that's where we are, and that's where our warfare comes down to. And see, the Bible does have its standards, and the Bible calls people out of darkness into God's light. It calls us out of a lifestyle that's destructive to us into a lifestyle that's productive and capable of carrying out God's will. And that's really what it's all about. See, whether the rest of the world accepts the biblical standards really isn't long-term the issue.
No.
It's whether we personally do it. So, cover that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Great questions.
So, how did you get the information about the National Defense Authorization Act? Like, do you watch YouTube? Do you just watch news, read the news? Like, how do you stay cutting edge on some of these topics?
Well, the first time I heard about it was directly on one of the radio talk shows late at night. I drive a lot at night, so.
Oh, no. Not coast to coast.
No.
Dumb.
George Norrie.
One night you'll get something, and next night you'll get UFOs.
I did that one night, and it sounded completely normal for like a good 20 minutes, and all of a sudden
Then
it's
you
going
realize
on
you're
about
listening to Looney Tunes.
aliens, and I was just like, what is up with it? And he's like, and these Jewish lizards, and whoa!
Jewish lizards. You listened longer than I did.
Jewish lizards.
But see, then I went back when I heard about it and documented.
Yeah, there was a video of the senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul, talking about the act.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought he was just talking about Sue. It says a foreign-born with missing digits who owned guns. And it was like, oh no, my brother,
Come get me tonight.
yeah, my brother.
Well, see, the thing that's playing in all the back of our minds is we know that tyranny is coming.
Is coming?
Yeah. I mean, the average
Hard
populace.
tyranny.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Hard
everything looks
tyranny,
normal out
rather
there.
than soft.
I mean, cars still running up and
Right,
down the streets.
yeah.
You know, so it doesn't look like tyranny is here. We know what's already in place. We already know the laws that they have already put in place, ready to
Right, yeah.
implement.
Do you see based off of your knowledge of Austrian economics, and what your current knowledge is on history and so on and so forth, do you think that we're headed? I mean, we're obviously headed, but do you think that we could have hyperinflation and a currency collapse like Germany and Zimbabwe did?
Absolutely. It keeps throwing $1 trillion additions to the federal deficit. It doesn't even take long to get a currency. If the world ever, if the central bankers, in other words, ever decide not to use the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency and move to something like special drawing rights or something like that, and all those dollars come flooding home,
Oh yeah.
you'd see hyperinflation.
Yeah.
And they can pull that trigger anytime they decide to do so.
Wasn't there an OPEC decision to switch from US dollar to like euros?
Euros, right? See, but that's proved smart now too, didn't it?
Yeah.
And they're trying to get a global currency.
Right, exactly. And that's where they're going.
Right.
With it. So again, it's that's a game they can play. When Switzerland went off the gold standard in 1999 with the adoption of a new constitution, no country in the world is on the gold standard. So all currencies are subject to manipulation by the bankers at will. So what they can do and what they will do, I mean, we don't know those things. But they certainly have the potential. They could collapse this economy tomorrow if
Right.
they chose to do so.
Yeah. What country right now do you think is the freest?
U.S.
Really?
When we talk about economic collapse and tyranny on our level, what does that look like?
Starvation.
Is that just because we don't import anything anymore? Or, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is what force do they use to suffocate us? Because the army is not 100% backing the government. Who would they use to enforce their tyranny?
People with guns and badges.
The absence of services, that's all they're going to do.
Yeah.
If the truck driver's not going to get paid tomorrow, he's not going to get in that truck to drive tomorrow.
It's also-
As soon as they collapse the money flow, they collapse everything.
And if they want to impose
People
tariffs,
still have to eat, and so
But the truck driver's not going to drive those tomatoes. In 3 days, all the stores are going to run out of food. They'll run out tonight if you turn on the news and they go, "There's no trucks coming tomorrow." Tonight, everybody's going to clean them out like a snowstorm.
But
It's
after
amazing.
that initial part of it, people still have to feed their families. And so wouldn't you immediately revert back to some kind of a barter system?
but if people,
If
if
there's
the
not enough.
government really wants to enforce tyranny on you, they're gonna use it. They're gonna use their power to imprison you and take away your economic freedom or your economic status.
But it doesn't serve them to do that. It serves them
If they
to
do it to a
slowly
few
implement
people,
something
you'll
to
be
control
afraid.
you.
You know, if they threaten,
Anarchy is not a tool for these people. The threat of it.
I think they just figured out that it's easier rather than just killing off masses of people to make them train to work for you and love it.
Well, that's the purpose of Gramscianism. The problem is, see, in the United States of America, you've got this tremendous resistance that does not exist in any other country in the world. You have a legacy of freedom. You have a biblical base. Morality is far in excess of any other country in the world. You have a cadre of educated Americans, many, many times larger than any other country in the world. So I I know that worries the big boys because they've never encountered anything like that. And so, you know, they've been working for years to try to rip the American public every possible way and, you know, break them into all kinds of factions because they're not sure when they get ready to make their final push, you know, what the response of the American public will be.
I guess that's what I'm wondering is where will they get their, what will be the driving force behind them, because there is so many people that will resist it, and it's not like they don't have guns. It's not like, I mean, you say you with guns and badges, well, there are plenty of people that don't really care if they have a badge.
Right, yeah.
They will just blow them to smithereens. So what will be, how would they, I guess I kind of see if they actually did push that envelope, the revolt would be so enormous.
Well, see, the problem we've got is back to the economic things that Dale's talking about. You collapse the economy, let's say you try to revert to a more barter system. So what are you going to barter Virginia tobacco for?
Milk and bread.
And where's the milk and bread going to come from?
Farmers.
In Virginia?
Okay, what are you going to barter tomorrow? What are you going to barter on Thursday? On Friday, Saturday? After a few days, everybody runs out of things around the house because cash is worthless.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, people are paying $1 trillion for a loaf of bread in Germany.
Right. I mean, I in that I understand, but
Well,
I
they
mean, you
also,
will figure out a way. You will figure out a way to survive, or you'll just.
And that's why education now is so important. Me and Meg know activists across the country that are already using alternate currencies right now, whether it's Bitcoin or whether it's like they're printing out, or they have like, dime cards or like little strands of silver that are worth a couple of dollars or whatever that these activists are trying to educate their local communities on the advantages of using sound money and alternate currencies as opposed to fiat money. And that's why education now is so important, because when it does happen, the people who don't know, don't understand how to voluntarily act instead of going off their hysteria and just start rioting or, you know, using violence to get what they need. That's why education is so important now. You know, education in the sense of the non-aggression principle, voluntarism, and sound money.
Well, because like right now, the education system is in the hands of the government, and so they've indoctrinated people since, you know, kindergarten, first grade, whatever, however long they've been in the government schools, and people have just learned to sympathize with them without even realizing what they're doing, because they have such an army of, right now, apathetic people. But, you know, like these people, when I got arrested for selling lemonade, there were so many people who said I should sit in jail for a year that supported that. And it's like they've, you know, confused these people into saying that a violation of law or not following authority is the true crime, it's the only crime that actually exists. And so people are sympathetic to it. People have been brainwashed into being sympathetic to it and hating or, you know, going after, attacking anybody who questions that. And so they do have this huge, stupid mass to use against the people who will rebel.
This stupid mass also is worthless. They don't know how to self-sustain. They rely 100% on the government. When those systems collapse, the people that are most fit to survive it are the ones like us who know what's coming and have been preparing and have been thinking about these things. Like you said, within a couple of weeks, months, they will not have their stupid masses. They will be gone.
Well, that's
unless they have a way to
tyranny
sustain
should
them.
come before the collapse, like the big attempt at, you know, squashing whatever rebellion there will be before they collapse everything. I think they're going to try that first, because they know that they have that, you know, stupid mass that can't take care of themselves to help them with that. And then once they crash the economy, that stupid mass is suddenly going to realize, oh man, like we messed up.
Well, tell me your story about selling lemonade there.
So there was like
Is
the string.
Was this in New Hampshire?
No, this was in Washington, D.C.
Washington, okay.
There's this string of news stories about cops shutting down little kids' lemonade stands for permits issues, like vending permits, stuff like that. So we had the Lemonade Freedom Day where people like across the country decided to set up illegal lemonade stands that were unpermitted, and we set up one on the like side lawn of Capitol. So we were selling lemonade for 10 cents and cops came and swarmed us, arrested us, and went through like 2-month long trial process before they finally just dropped the case. But yeah, I was charged with vending without a permit and failure to obey an officer.
And they finally arrested him on their last cup of lemonade.
Yeah, I was carrying my last cup of lemonade when he arrested me. It's so sad. I was like, if you just would have let me hand it to her, I could have been on my way.
And one of the police officers, because we were all, the cops were using the excuse, we're just doing our job. And so me and a couple other activists were like, well, how far would you take that? Would you uphold segregation laws today if that was your job? And surprisingly enough, an African American cop said that he would do that. And then later on that day, when we were in front of the police station, I saw him again, and he said that he would arrest anybody to keep his 6-figure job. So, yeah.
There we go. That's nice.
Yeah, they had a terrorism investigator come in and talk to me for like 2 hours. And after, like, finally I just got so fed up with him, and I was like, dude, where's your line in the sand? Like, at what point do you say, I can't do that to somebody because it's too wrong? Because if you don't define that, you're going to cross it and then regret it. And you're going to, like, you can't post-define your line in the sand. And they never get that. You know, they're just like, no, it's just my job. And it's like, it doesn't work in Nuremberg, it doesn't work here. You know, like, we aren't at that extreme. Nobody shot me for selling lemonade. But the fact that I had to, you know, sit chained to a wall for 5 hours for a simple act of selling lemonade, that's stupid.
You were defying the government.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it is a very quick leap to go from locking somebody up for something to shooting them for something.
Yeah.
It's a very quick leap.
It's so simple.
We
you
saw
aren't willing to,
examples of that in Katrina in New Orleans, where the National Guard and Army Reservists were breaking down people's doors, and even there was a big news story of they tried to take the gun in some Baptist preacher, and I mean they were just taking guns off of people, and they were using violence to do it.
These were people in the mansions on the hills that they weren't flooded, and they had guns because people were looting. And if you live in a mansion on the hill, you weren't flooded, people are looting, you're going to want a gun. And those are the people that they decide to go take their weapons.
Yeah, there's this one video of this like 65-year-old lady with a revolver that probably wasn't even loaded, like it got tackled by like 8 cops.
Yeah, it was pretty sad.
Yeah, that was kind of a training exercise for them, really.
Yeah.
So that's why I call it the, you know, rapid deployment strike force and urban, you know, warfare, you know, what they're all being trained in. And that's, you know, so those are the, you know, first claws of tyranny that, you know, really begin to show themselves. But generally what they do at some point, they starve the population into submission. And that's because they have to. And see, because you're starving, you don't have a lot of energy.
And you
Can't think.
and if your kids are starving, you're going to do what you
Yeah.
like I already, this is a conversation that we've had because as a Christian, where's our place in this? You know, okay, we have guns. Sometimes I ask myself, for what reason? If things went haywire and people knew, look, they live on land, they have chickens, they have food stored up, they're going to come leave their house. Am I really going to shoot them for coming to get food? Because I know why they're coming to get food. They're starving, their kids are starving. It's just like, and obviously,
when you hand them an egg and do the whole teach them in the fish thing.
yeah, my whole purpose is, you know, I'm not here to protect my food. I'm not even really here to protect my kids. My purpose here is to glorify Christ. Shooting somebody in the head for coming to get some food is not glorifying Christ. So it's like, you know, you think about how these things will play out, and I'm certain that families like ours will be some of the first to go because we will just end up having to succumb to. I don't know, do you resist against that? I mean, I guess you just flee.
You have to wait. I mean, you try to you either had to predict ahead of time what you're going to do. The problem is, it's so unpredictable what's coming. You don't know what direction. That's where it's really important that we have our trust and faith in God. Excuse me, and have that be our focus, because God has ways of doing little protection things that on the surface look like pure coincidence, you know. And, you know, he gives you little examples of that in the Old Testament. Remember the time that Samaria is under siege? And, the lady approaches the king. The king's walking near the wall, and the lady approaches king, and she says, "Oh, king, hear my complaint." And he said, "What's your complaint, lady?" He said, "Well, me and this other woman had an agreement that if we eat my child yesterday, then today we eat hers. And so yesterday we ate my child, and today she refused for me to eat hers." And the king, basically got his sword thrown to him. So what am I supposed to do? The prophet, hears that. Elisha says, "Well, tell us, this is the message for the king. Tomorrow, about this time, the quart of wheat is going to be sold at regular market prices." So there's the king's bodyguard standing there and said, "How could this be?" And the message from the prophet is, "Well, you'll see it, but you won't get to eat any of it." So early that morning, a couple guys that were lepers, outside the gate, they said, "Well, we're dying here, starving, and let's go over to the army of the Arameans here, and let's see. I mean, if they kill us, we're going to die either way. So, let's go ahead and go." So they went. Well, they found that something had terrified the Syrian army in the middle of the night. They left everything, left all the food, provisions, the whole works. So the lepers, they kind of helped themselves, and they think, it's not right for us to be doing this. So they go back and they spread the word. Well, they sent out some horses, if they had a couple of crowbait horses left, so they went out to check and see. But not definitely, the Syrian army was gone, and the track they went, they were leaving clothes and everything else. So, came back. So, the king's bodyguard, he was standing at the gate. When the announcement was made, "No, it's real." And so when the people rushed through the gate to get at the food, they trampled him. And so he saw the price go down, but he didn't get to eat any of it because he died. See, but my point is, God has ways of protecting his people that on the surface, it's like pure coincidence or something, see, but God has ways of doing that when we're useful in his service. And I think ultimately that's where we really need to go. And all this is to unless the Lord guards the city, they watch in vain. And that's where we really need to go with this ultimately. The Lord can protect us and put us in key positions and use us where he wants us. And, way better than we can do any of that ourselves.
Plus, if I was Satan, I would try to deceive the church into getting involved in things that take them away from benefiting God.
Like extreme mountain biking.
Yes, that would definitely hurt.
And you gotta understand that you can't hold on to that, like that physical stuff that you think is so important. For instance, Nebuchadnezzar, he was used by God, but he had to let go, or all those people had to leave Jerusalem and be deported, which was probably the most horrible thing they could probably ever think of. And it was not pleasant. People suffered. But Nebuchadnezzar was in just the right place at just the right time. Not Nebuchadnezzar, what's the guy's name? Starts with Nehemiah. And then he's the king's cupbearer at the time, and then he can go back to Jerusalem. And but if he sat around moaning the fact that they left Jerusalem and he's everything's bad and he has this bad attitude, then God can't use that. He has to find somebody else who has got his heart and mindset on the fact that God can use him wherever he's at. So, if we're sitting around attached to this country, we might like this country, but if God's done with it, it's done with it. We need to figure out how to make the best of what's coming next.
Yeah, that's true. To me, it's sad. you know, I got kids and I got grandkids, you know, it's kind of same position a little bit. And, you know, they're not getting to grow up in, you know, in the type of country that I got to grow up in. See, and I say it's playing in the back of the mind of all of us, kind of like death plays in the back of the mind of all of us. And so how do we handle those things in a positive way, and you know, keep the right focus? I think every Christian needs to be educated in all these things. You know, really hope the voluntarism works. It's worth a shot. Just know enough about human nature, you know, when it gets crunch time. You know, unless people are really committed Christians, pretty likely they'll break down. And then another problem is again, you'll have people that become part of that for the wrong reasons. And then on top of that, you know, I've worked enough with the feds to know that they infiltrate, and so they act just like they're one of you, and then at the right time they explode it. You know what I mean? Say Leroy Schweitzer was the Freeman. Do you guys remember the Freeman up there in Montana? Yeah. I don't know if you guys remember it, but say Leroy, he got a hold of the banker's handbook. Been looking for it. The banker's handbook is what the Federal Reserve System uses to create money out of nothing. So he went to Butte, Montana, he used the banker's handbook, and he opened an account for $77 million. Okay. Now, he's got the paperwork, see, he's got the same paperwork. They can't refuse him. See? And so what he's doing is he's writing checks off that account. You know, farmers that can't pay their taxes, you know, bad year. So he's writing checks to the IRS out of that account to bail these farmers out. Now, the IRS accepted those. The problem came when Leroy went to the next step and started bringing other people in, educating them how to do the same thing. And so what happened then is this kind of ranch house, I mean, Montana's pretty desolate, really it is. I mean, there's less than 1 million people in the entire state. You know, it's 4 times the size of Virginia. And so he's out there in one of the most desolate spots. He's bringing other people in. See, that's when the feds started working inside his organization. He didn't know they were there. But the FBI was one of his key guys. And see, I knew Leroy personally. I actually had Bible studies with him, and all 4 of his kids are Christians. And so, see, at some point, and I could tell from the newspaper, I told my wife, she said, they're going to arrest Leroy. She said, how can you tell? I said, look at these articles in the paper. What they're doing is they're preparing us. See, they already got it planned out. They're preparing us for his arrest. Sure enough, they got him. This guy was his close friend, who was the secret FBI agent, said, let's take a quick walk. And so they walked and they arrested him. Now, the story gets even more interesting. I'm in Lisbon, Ohio, and the guy comes to where I'm preaching, and he's a one-armed guy, and he's the head of the Ohio militia. And so he's telling me, to see what happened is the Ohio and the Michigan militia went to Montana to defend Leroy and the guys who worked with him from the feds. So at the right spot, this guy gives the orders for the militia to stand down. And he quoted me the exact speech that he gave when he gave the orders for them to stand down. Well, that's interesting. See, because they're right at the exact spot. He gives the orders for the militia to stand down, and the FBI arrests Leroy. So I just lodged that in the back of my mind. Well, sometime later, there's a federal prisoner we need to see in one of the federal prisons that's in Ohio. And nobody can get in. And this guy says, I can get you in. The head of the Ohio militia got one of our preacher friends into that federal prison. Now, how does he have the ability to get somebody inside his FBI property?
Yeah.
The head of the militia is the FBI property. So you have to watch out for the agent provocateurs.
Yeah.
You know, that walk in your midst.
Yeah, for like, I live in New Hampshire with the Free State Project normally, and it's really easy for us to kind of pick people out that we are a bit iffy about because all of us are completely nonviolent, and the first moment that anybody ever mentions anything like even, you know, let's go break a windshield of a police car, we're like, okay, you are gone. Like, we don't want to associate with you. We don't want to be a part of what you're doing. We don't want to, you know, our thing is messing with that. And so I think as long as we continue to keep it that way, it should be pretty easy.
Well, see, they'll figure that out, though.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, I've broken law and never felt bad about it because I know I'm not doing anything morally wrong. It's just, you know, pieces of paper that say I'm doing something wrong. Whereas I would never, under any circumstance other than like self-defense, hurt or harm anybody or, you know, steal something like that. And so I think pretty much across the board, all of us are like that. And if I was to get busted, I guess, for something, it would have to be for a crime that I wouldn't feel was a crime. And so I wouldn't be ashamed of it.
Well, I understand exactly where you're coming from. You know, I was, you know, lecturing one time. I was exposing the Yellowstone to Yukon project, but see, they have these big programs in Montana. See, essentially they're using the buffalo and the wolves and the grizzly bears to run the population off the land. See, because humans and these animals can't coexist. You know, and so I was exposing this, and something called the Greater Yellowstone Coalition showed up. Now they showed up as incognito, see. And so I'm, you know, kind of making my PowerPoint presentation, and this guy says, "Well, let's just get some guns and go down, you know, to the Capitol, or, you know." See bingo, right? Like,
Yeah.
Recognize this. Yeah. So I know who this guy is, and so I keep lecturing. And see, at some point, I just threw a comment in there that, you know, during the Middle Ages it was a lot warmer than it is now. And he says, "No way!" See, and I knew exactly what he was. But the head of the Greater Yellowstone Coalition, he's smart. See, he sat in the back, and he waited everybody else's out. And he walks by, and he just hands me a note. He says, "Call me." So, I mean, you know, so those, I mean, we just have to be really intelligent about these things, and like I say, some of them will get smart enough that they won't try to, you know, let's go do some violence thing. And, you know, they'll start working inside. It'll be much more difficult to identify. But they'll be there.
Like the communists have done over the last 50 years. If they tried to do it by violence, they would have gotten shut down. So it's just act like one of us, but they keep passing this and passing that and doing this. And pretty soon they walk us down this path that we don't really want to go down.
I just don't feel threatened by it. I don't know. Like, anytime even mention the idea of like a Fed being in our midst, or like our Pork Fest, the festival that we have every summer or something like that, I'm just like, I don't care. Like, maybe if anything, they'll come to our side because we just won't go their way. But I'm strong enough in my conviction that I don't fear.
Go for it.
I do.
The only crazy thing is, history shows if they can't get you to voluntarily do something stupid that will compromise you, they will set you up or falsely accuse you.
And that's why I said I don't fear it. Like, if I end up in jail or dead or something like that, I didn't do anything wrong.
It can get crazy.
See, it's amazing how, in all levels, there's tremendous warfare going on, you know. Right down to from the lemonade stand to everything else. See, it didn't used to be that way in this country, but that's where we are, and that's why that's why I say this battle ultimately needs to be fought and won on spiritual grounds by truly spiritual people, and that's why I'm encouraging you to keep doing your digging, because see that you're going to need that spiritual strength that you can't get any other way.
Do you think any moral action or action done out of compassion or morality loses all its purpose or intention or anything without a Christian base?
Yeah. See, the reason for that is not so much to do that I wouldn't say it loses its value, but it doesn't count with God. See, the problem is I use the broken window illustration. I think, see, one sin breaks the window, and you can never do enough compassionate acts, to repair that window. And so, what happens to happen is we have to be in Christ in order for that window to get repaired, and then all those things really count. See, the way Jesus put it, whoever in the name of a disciple gives even one of these little ones a cup of cold water in my name, he will not lose his reward. See, but it only really counts when we're in Christ.
But do you think it can still have a positive effect?
Yeah,
Well,
it
it's
could be
positive on the world.
mutually beneficial, without a doubt.
Yeah, it has a positive effect on the world, but it doesn't gain us anything in terms of salvation.
Great conversation.
Thank you for your question. Very good question.
Do you leave town soon? Are you moving somewhere again?
I'll probably be going back to New Hampshire soon.
Yeah. Awesome.
I just gotta find a new place up there.
We have a neighbor where I grew up. They grew Christmas trees in New Hampshire. Willie's Christmas trees. They still live here in Mechanicsville. They spend about 4 or 5 months up there. Split up over 2 times.